The type of attention you get and who you get it from determines where we end up in life.
We always got.
This has already been accepted at the University of Texas in Austin, electrical
In a
engineering.
community where the statistics aren't the best, the default isn't the best either.
The gentleman who's going to be on the field representing South San,
Defensive captain of the varsity football team.
Mr. Jesus Rendon.
His life to giving back to this community.
St. Joseph's Catholic Church Choir.
So I decided to start a nonprofit called Building a Purpose.
And if we can raise that default to be something of higher standards,
Help students find their purpose in life.
I think we can do something.
We all we
Welcome
need.
to the Service and Devine Podcast, where we talk about life, purpose, and God. Our next guest here is Mr. James Aldrete, who is a political consultant and has been on many high-profile campaigns to include the former Governor Ann Richards and former President Barack Obama. More importantly, and his probably one of his most greatest accomplishment, is he is a UT grad.
Ooh, welcome.
James, thank you for being here, sir.
Brother. Thank you for the invitation, my friend. I appreciate
Yes, sir.
just admiring everything you're doing here in the community.
Thank you. We're doing our best. So, how's life? It's been a minute since we chat. I know we had breakfast this morning, but what's new?
You have kids.
That's true.
You got a house. You got a building. The nonprofit that you had just started is celebrating 10 years.
Wow.
So that this minute has been a long one. So it's nice to catch up on stuff. Life in Austin is going great for us, But don't get me wrong, everything that's happening kind of around the world hits us, and
Right.
We know we got responsibility to kind of stay involved and see if we can change the nature of some of these conversations.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly crazy times. As we were talking about earlier, man. I'm spending later nights. I'm not the type to really surf through my phone at night, but man, it's hard to get away seeing all the things that are going on in the States and across the world. Geez. And not to include, not even to mention the mayoral race that just wrapped up, and I'd seen you would sit in on some of those conversations and expectations. What was your take on the outcomes of the mayoral election?
I think it was, both the success of democracy and some of the challenges of it. So it was 27 candidates. People thought that should be vetted, but that's just people wanting to serve their community. I thought that was great. The fact that many people, you had interviews with city council candidates. My brother did interviews with all the mayoral candidates, or as many as he could make, to kind of make sure that there's that education getting people involved. Still, you saw fairly low voter turnout the first time around, and it increased the second time around. Really happy for Gina Ortiz-Jones. Happy for San Antonio. I think you're going to start to see more of who she is. But she did speak up on issues that, there are people that think any city's an island and it's just about electing just for your city, but we live in a larger world and those issues affect us. And if you're not looking out for your neighbors and how they're affected by that and listening to them and then speaking up for them, I think she got the credit for doing that.
Right. Yeah, it was an interesting race. I think I feel like there's always a heavy candidate entry list of people running for mayor, but this time I think it took the cake. I think
27 is a big ballot to go through.
That's a lot. Yeah, I feel like maybe the last time was 16 or so, but geez,
27. Some of the city council races you had 9 candidates. I mean, you're like voters
wild.
had the research to do this time around.
Exactly. And session just being over, what did you take from at the state level?
I'm glad it's over, and hope they stay away for a while.
Yeah, at least 2 years, huh?
At least 2 years. I think we shared some passions and commitments, but haven't gone through it all. I'm not saying we're always on the same page, but public education is core to I think a strong community. It's a core value. My wife's the daughter of 2 public school teachers. My mom was a public school teacher. My dad integrated public schools in West Texas, back in the day. That sense of they're not looking out for the 90%, they're looking out for the 10%, moving money away, that they did that before funding public education, period. I think what I love about what you're doing in South San is keeping it very local. And I think some of the unsung heroes in our community are definitely teachers.
Right.
And I think we need to continue to elevate the role they're doing. And thanks for what you're doing on South San.
Thank you. No, you're bullseye on right there. Especially for me growing up, some of the most successful people I knew were the teachers who are sitting in the classroom instructing on that school board. And
I don't think anyone gets in it to be rich.
That's true.
But, the fact that they should be able to afford to take care of their own kids as they're helping serve other kids, I think is decency.
Is a minimum. Yeah.
And then you want to keep them in the classroom because we get better, hopefully, year after year.
Right.
And then you want to make sure that they feel appreciated. We all will face those moments of burnout. But I think part of the challenge with public schools is we burn those teachers out quickly. We don't show that level of respect and appreciation. And it goes from all levels of just simply parental involvement, but it also is making sure that their health care is there and that they have, a salary that they can just afford to live and take care of their own families.
Right. Yeah, they're the true warriors on the front line, man. I mean, they're the mentor, they're the instructor, the educator, parents, even to some of the kids who go in there. And I know a lot of times they even fork up some of their own money. So it's certainly an honorable field, and some of the most well-off people I know started out as teachers. The irony. Something about having a heart for service and a heart to see the next generation succeed. So tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up.
My dad's from Del Rio. That's where the family started. All 4 of my older siblings were born in Del Rio. And then a border lawyer with a growing family. He moved to Austin. My dad served as the regional administrator for the Office of Economic Opportunity, OEO, under LBJ. And so I was born in Austin.
Okay. You're one of the originals.
I'm one of the originals.
There's a lot of people who moved to Austin, but not very many born in Austin.
Born in Austin, so I get the cred for that. But then I was 4 months old and we moved to D.C.
Right.
I grew up on the East Coast, and some other political families that were up in D.C., they'd have to send a bag of dirt and put it underneath the bed so they could say they were born over Texas soil. I was born in the old Seton Hospital in Austin, Texas.
All right. So you were born in Brackenbridge?
I was born in Seton.
Seton.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was mid '60s.
Okay.
Then grew up in the suburbs of DC, and I call it the barrios of McLean or the barrios of Northern Virginia, but it was my parents became big followers of St. Jude because he was the patron saint of lost causes. But when they got their $40,000 mortgage or $35,000 mortgage to buy the house, it was because of those prayers, and
right.
That area has boomed, but it was plenty of great friends. It was a fascinating area because you had a lot of people in public service, but it was also at the same time a transient area. So people would kind of come in and come out.
Right.
For my parents' period, it was they thought it was going to be a 2-year move that lasted 20. And so it went on for a bit longer. But those kind of community ties you had to really build because that infrastructure wasn't there. But, block parties and fascinating neighbors and diverse people you met, It was a great experience.
All right. Did you latch on to any mentors while you were there to get you into a political?
I think, so my dad went up on what was supposed to be LBJ's reelection. And so he did kind of Mexican-American politics for the DNC, and then job after job and other opportunities. But the House was really just a gathering point for all politicos from the Southwest. People would come, there'd be dinner, Dad would bring friends over for dinner, hosting people. You'd just sit there as a kid and absorb the conversations. You'd hear this, more of the civil rights war stories, but you'd also hear what's kind of going on. So I'd say, my dad is still one of my heroes and probably the biggest mentor. But, I remember it was Ruben Montemayor that ran a small newspaper here in San Antonio that would come up often. He also, I think, had a law firm and other stuff. There was Fabian Chavez was a state rep out of Santa Fe and out of New Mexico that would visit through. And then the opportunity to kind of be exposed to just really other voices in public service and other voices in civil rights.
Okay. Did your dad ever tell you stories about Kennedy and...
It was probably a little bit more about, LBJ. Yeah. I mean, it was part of just the...
You were born just after he was assassinated.
Yeah. So, the stereotype or the cliche was, they'd go block walking through the West Side, and you'd see, a photo of the Pope and then a photo of Kennedy kind of side by side. And in our house, there was always like an unseen altar to the Voting Rights Act. And it was a Kennedy agenda that LBJ was able to carry out, first on the Civil Rights Act and then on the Voting Rights Act. And then it was in the 1970s when, senators and others made sure that Texas was added to that Section 5 part of it. We had protections for Hispanic voters too.
Yeah. Did your dad get to meet LBJ and hang out with him, or?
Hang out. I'm sure. There was my brother tripped over like in the garage one time, just boxes of letter writing, because my parents originally had kind of a long distance relationship, and so it's just courtship by letter writing.
Really?
And you'd get a lot of some of those stories. I think it was even in the later part of it, just other friends would send back letters that my dad would send to them. And one was really when LBJ was, passing the torch to, I guess, to Nixon, and was leaving the White House. Just had a nice, handshake and embrace. There was definitely times we have photos of just being on the LBJ ranch.
Wow.
That network of Texans that were part of that, he was definitely part of. And there are photos in my house that are still hanging of my dad, in the presence of LBJ. It was him, Congressman Kazin, and one, and LBJ.
Wow. Yeah. What about Henry B?
Henry B, they were really of the same era.
Yeah.
Henry B maybe a few years, maybe about 10 years older than my dad. And, one of the early campaigns that I got to do, and my brother, too, at the same time, is we helped, Charlie continue the legacy of his dad. And that was, just a way to honor both history and then keep that sense of knowledge of where the fight needs to kind of go on.
Right.
Fight is an overused word, but just having that sense of purpose, and making sure that we're living up to kind of constitutional ideals. It was great to help Charlie fill the shoes of his dad.
Yeah, when you get a convention center named after you, you're doing something right.
But he had to rock the boat a number of times and go through a lot of personal threats to get that recognition.
There's a lot of firsts for him.
A lot of firsts. But as he became a target, he was able to kind of brush it off, keep the head up high, and he knew what he was doing it for.
When did you really start getting casting your interest in politics? Do you think it was mostly secondhand from all the efforts your dad was doing through his work, or do you think there was a specific moment?
I think it was definitely osmosis in the house. And it might not have hit. I'm the youngest of 5. It might not have hit all my siblings, but it hit me from every direction.
Yeah.
I remember voting in 2nd grade. You did the mock elections, and I voted for McGovern, and then people, spread the nasty rumors that he wanted school on Saturdays, and so I had to fight that misinformation.
Oh man, some things never change, huh?
But we had a TV set. You didn't have multiple TV sets in the house. There was only a certain number of channels, and so the news was on, and watching the news with my dad was a constant. Watching election results come in, always paying attention to what was happening in Texas. And that sense of, again, part of it was standing up for the Voting Rights Act, those that wanted to push back on things, making sure that college is affordable for all generations and for all communities. Those are just conversations in the house.
Right. Do you favor more towards your mom or your dad?
I think I got a healthy combination of both. I would definitely say that Dad was the hero that I, modeled a lot of things after. But then I think when it comes to family life, so much credit goes to my mom. There's nothing, frankly, more fun ever than just being in the kitchen with my siblings. And her pushing that constantly and forcing that, time can pass between sometimes seeing each other, but when we see each other, it's like no time has passed at all.
Right.
Parenting, more of that comes from mom. There's no doubt. And it was part like growing up in Northern Virginia, friends would, go to Disneyland for a vacation, we'd pack 5 kids in a car and go to Borderland and drive 2,000 miles. Occasionally, we'd do a motel stop in between. Sometimes it was how fast can we get there, and it was always to get down to Brownsville so she could see her sisters. And that sense of like family and where you're coming from was just driven into us on that part of it.
So your mom was born in Brownsville and your dad was in
Del
Del
Rio.
Rio? Wow. What values do you think your parents instilled in you?
My mom was the youngest of 11. My dad was 7 out of 11. So just family was kind of everywhere.
Right.
But we'd, walk into the house and she made sure beforehand that she goes, you're going to greet everybody. You're going to kiss all the ladies, no matter if they're bigatonas or not. It doesn't matter how old they are, or scary they are, or sweaty they are, or whatever else.
Right.
You're going to greet them. And then when we leave, you're going to make sure you do it all in reverse and say goodbye to everyone and show that level of respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think that part of respect and greeting and connection, I think, was there. But at the same time, I told you about just really, there was always people at the dinner table. It was really the hospitality.
Yeah.
And, I heard the stories from Del Rio. It was a small little house that used to be the family store that, was passed to my dad. So, I don't know, 600 square feet, Adobe-ish old house. But they would still entertain. It doesn't matter what you have, you offer what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sense of connectedness and service and family, I think, were the main things driven in.
For me, I never understood my dad more until I became a man and had a family. And I always favored towards my mom as a kid until I came of age. But what is there a quote you live by?
Not really, that I can think of, or that it isn't something I wake up every day to.
Sure.
But I will say that if you put me on that reflection, it puts me really back when my dad was going through his cancer. And so it was a combination of care between Austin and then the Methodist Hospital in Houston. And the lobby of the Methodist Hospital, they have this big glass sculpture with just the quote etched in it. And it's I think it's Tagore is... But it's like I dreamt and slept and I slept and dreamt that life was but joy. I woke and realized that life was service, and then I acted and realized that service is joy. So that sense of we have a responsibility to each other is definitely a motivating driver.
Okay.
You? What's your quote?
I've got a bunch. Different seasons for different parts of life, but one of the ones that always sticks for me is the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. and I added a little something to it. Be patient, but be ready. And I think as a kid, I always wanted to grow up fast, and I was always eager and I was like, I want to get big. I want to get big like you, Dad. I want to grow tall. I want to be this, and plus I was the youngest in my class, being a summer baby, right?
Yeah.
And so I was always eager, and I always do something in a rush or fast, and then realize I didn't see the whole thing through or something. And so the early bird gets the worm, right? Is like, whoever wakes up discipline-wise, he gets it. But the second mouse gets the cheese, so you got to make sure it is what you think it is. And then, taking an even further step back, be patient to see that everything else, but be ready. So when you're ready to strike, you go all in. So I don't know. I mean, nobody's asked me back, but that's cool. I added a little bit to it.
I learn every time I talk to you.
Well, my wife, she hears it a lot. She's that same one, so she'd be able to be like, okay, oh my God, you're saying that one again. I feel like my dad too, because I hear all his stories over and over and his jokes, right? But okay, so what we were just talking about the nature of how crazy this world is right now, and especially here in town, and the big push to get undocumented people back to, and citizens in some cases, back to countries they may have never been from. What can people do?
It's not the first time. I think is a good thing to remind ourselves, not to overly normalize this or accept this, but it's not the first time.
Right.
And every time that there's been an anti-immigrant wave, and we're in a very severe one right now, the step one in what they do is to dehumanize people. The broad brush that they're rapists or they're Venezuelan gang members, or that tattoo doesn't mean that they're a Chicago Bulls fan. It means that they're a gang member of something, with no proof or no due process. Number one we have to do is tell their stories. These are real people, many of them dads, many of them moms, many of them with kids that they're separating, and they're really putting, huge amounts of stress on. Everyone has said it forever. We've had a broken system, and so we've ignored the broken system, and because we haven't done that work, they're taking the brunt of it. They're now enforcing just arcane laws that have never been enforced, or rules to even deport more, and they have, their huge quotas. But I think our first responsibility is to put a human face on these people, and make sure that we understand that there are real lives that are being torn apart, and their lives, frankly, that were heavily contributing to our communities. So I think that's goal one. Task two is to take a little bit of introspection and ask ourselves, why are we being this quiet? And I think relatively we're quiet still. We're not the type to protest. I don't know if that's effective. Okay, so we're quiet because that's not our tactic. Are we quiet because, law and order, or are they here the right way? If there is a broken system, and if your family survival requires a move, I think that's heroic. For whatever the families have done to kind of promote themselves and make sure that they're surviving and they're passing on something to a next generation. So then we have to have real things. All right, who is working at fixing a broken system? And I get it. There's only one party in power right now, but that party in power right now, in my opinion, has shown no interest, no intellectual curiosity. Those that used to, and Lindsey Graham used to be part of the discussion about immigration reform along with John McCain. He's gone full in, and there's no interest in that aspect of it. Like I said, mom's family's from Brownsville, border town, uncles that worked for customs and on the bridge, dad's family's from Del Rio. The oldest cousin worked with customs, and when we were crossing to Acuña, say hello to, Primo Mario, and as he welcomed us in, and then charged us for whatever my dad brought back. Having a functional border. I think Texas voices especially. 1 out of 5 jobs are trade-based jobs in Texas. We're right here in the shadow of Port San Antonio as well. There are historical ties. We know what land this used to be. We know what the towns are named after. I think there needs to be both education and understanding at the same time to saying, all right, if there are systematic things that are broken, we need to step up and do that work as well. For those, and I'm in that camp, for those that believe what's happening right now is so overreaching, is not even borderline, it's beyond cruel. It's reckless. And it has no regard for the families that they're breaking up. We have to both humanize the people that it's happening to. We have to call it out that those are not morals that we believe in or reflect upon us. And then we have to buck up and do the work to really put some policy stuff, even as the party out of power, saying, here's where we would move for really comprehensive immigration reform. That's always kind of thrown out that this all needs to be done. I think it's in our court to put that together too. But real quick, because you also said cross the aisles. You've had the restaurant industry speak up quietly, back channels. You've had the hotel industry speak up quietly, maybe back channels. You've had the ag industry, speak up, and for a moment they weren't being targeted. You have a lot of kind of Midwestern communities that are really Trump country, that when a long restaurateur is, removed or deported, they didn't see him as that person. And the reality is coming too. I think we also need that forgiveness of however you voted and recreate this conversation about this has gone too far. And there's got to be a challenge, not a shaming challenge, but a challenge to invite people back to that conversation that we need to speak up as a community that this has gone too far, that there is no rhyme or reason. They're just having massive quotas that they're pushing a whole system to do. And it is no longer about criminals, no matter what they say. People with legal standing here. The scary part, I mean, for what we stand up for, people that have peacefully protested and expressed an opinion that it's not popular with this administration, yanked. Those laws are not supposed to be vindictive. They're not supposed to be personal, but they really pick and choose on how they want to apply those laws. And so we need to create that space to invite people into that conversation. I don't think it should be in left and right or an aisle part of it, but you do have to invite people across the aisle because they have to stand up and take the consequences for their vocal opinion in opposition, and give them the space to do it. If they don't, move on. But we also have to challenge our own political fatigue, that getting in this daily and seeing another headline every day, no matter what the issue, it makes you also start to feel a little bit powerless. But democracies are folded through intimidation and all sorts of fascist tactics, and they're only alive through the determination of understanding that we're one voice. You connect with a second voice, you build a movement.
Right. Now, I love how you talk through it, starting at the face of each of these, starting right at the ground level. I can keep coming to this, and I'm at a loss for words. Is how do we help in that immediate time? And I guess the best thing is just to try to educate people on what their basic rights are, right, and what they should be doing, and best ways to avoid this, because the pendulum will swing back, right? Who knows how long it'll be? Maybe it'll be 2 years, the next election, and we wait for it again. The 1930s.
I'm not a believer in waiting for pendulums. I'll just say that.
Right.
If there is a pendulum, then let's just hope there's a gust of wind that keeps it moving. Let's hope there's a ceiling that if it goes in the wrong direction, that we're putting a stop to it.
Right.
It is our action that moves that part of it. At the moment, I mean, yes, there is a pendulum or a tide, that turned in 20. I don't believe it was an anti-immigrant thing. I believe it was mainly an economic insecurity aspect of it that had people changing some patterns to their previous voting, or compartmentalizing everything negative that he says, but just believing that he'll have some economic solutions. And those economic solutions aren't there. People aren't seeing that. But if we're back on the immigration part of it, and I'll actually say it kind of goes hand in hand. When people are feeling economically insecure is when they're the most or the least empathetic to immigrants, and maybe the most threatened by them. And that comes in not just with Anglos, it comes in with Hispanics. If you're second or third generation, you really don't know how you got here, but it was told to you got here the right way,
right?
Or so we'll separate ourselves from that. There'll be people saying, well, they're getting free hotel rooms, or they're getting things that we never got. Hey, it's just a bed. It is not a life. And it is, also making sure that they're safe, that you're creating less havoc in communities, but it's still a product of kind of a broken system. But if we have economic opportunities for people, and then understand at the same time that how everything that they've done step by step to take away just due process and a voice, they knocked off, the nonprofits from having access to give legal advice. They've arrested political people that simply walk an immigrant into court, not away from court, into court. And so there are these aspects of intimidation to kind of silence us. But we need to do both. We need to, be brave in front of the intimidation, especially those who are the least vulnerable. If you get, as Senator Padilla did, if you get manhandled and pushed to the ground, that's the worst that happens to us. It's still minuscule compared to those who are really vulnerable.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's so hard, man. But
All right,
I think
it is hard, but let me ask you, because you're very close to the community, where are you seeing hope?
where am I seeing hope? I think that our community is stuck, right? And maybe we haven't, like you said, we're not the loudest, right? We're not, and traditionally, you're not seeing a whole bunch of Hispanics getting up for marches and as loud as other cultures have fought for their fundamental rights, right? And then part of it, maybe they don't know the language, right? And those who come here for the first generation, they're afraid to break the laws. They're afraid to speak out. They don't know what's right or what's wrong in this new country. So I think there's some cultural things there, but fundamentally, I see hope in neighbors taking care of each other. Me knowing my neighbors who are vulnerable, and me knowing my neighbors who.
That's how it started in LA. Yeah,
who can help. But then it comes to there's some things that I don't even know, right? Some outdated law of how they're able to, I don't know, come into your quarters or come into a church or come into a building that, if ever presented with that adversity right in front of me, I'd hope that I would act in a way that is lawful, if possible, but also an effective solution to be able to protect those who need it the most. And so the hope I see in this, really, I mean, if I had to put one thing on it, is that more people will be motivated to speak up for what is right and have long-term visions into sustainable change. I mean, I think that's the politically right answer, I would say, but if I'm a betting man, if I'm using my engineering hat, more people are still going to be suffering every day. Like, it's inevitable, and it's part of the process of what the administration has rolled out. And part of, maybe they'll catch some real bad actors, right? Part of it, but how many good ones will have gone too because of it?
I think they know the difference between the bad actors and the good ones. I just don't think they care, or they haven't shown the care. I think they've signaled that they really do have quotas that they're meeting, and that the quotas and the actions are no longer meeting, or have never really met the rhetoric, that they're after the criminals, or they're after those who are a threat. And you've seen it's broad from what happened to LA to any student of whatever background that is here on a visa and exercise First Amendment rights and express an opinion that was not popular. But then we talk too. We're on the day of the announcement where they're renaming Fort Cavazos and back to Fort Hood. To the sense there's not even a respect for a Vietnam vet who sacrificed to save others and put himself on the line time and again. That level of just dignity and respect that this is a country where everyone contributes. There's a fundamental difference. If they can't stand by that and stand by Fort Cavazos, we're not going to see them stand by that in immigration. That doesn't mean, their rhetoric that didn't go challenged enough. It doesn't mean open door policy, but it means we got to sit down and do the work and invite people in to figure out, how do we have new quotas? Back in the day, it was the Gang of Eight, but you had the, AFL-CIO sit down with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they came to agreements on quotas and where you support both a labor force without threatening a domestic labor force. Yeah, it could have an orderly process part of it. Things changed, that eventually broke down, but that was the closest we got to fixing. But the problem is, that's what governing is. It's like work. It's sitting down with folks. But we also, the same people that are, in my opinion, abusing the system to push a very extreme immigration policy are also the same ones that denigrate the value of government overall. DOGE is about denigrating the value of government. The repetition of waste, fraud, and abuse is there, even as they decimate FAA, to keep us safe in the skies, or, destroy FEMA for after, a disaster, a natural disaster occurs, or getting rid of the scientists in the ag department to stop, bird flu from killing off our chicken population and make eggs go even higher in price. everything they do is really with just no regard to the fact that governance is service. It can be more efficient, sure, but governance is service. It is our commitment to each other. And so that goes really hand in hand with seeing humanity in immigrants, and also saying we can come together and create a functioning immigration system.
Not an easy time, and I think one of the, I lean on the pendulum, and maybe it's not the pendulum swinging back, because there's always forces that'll push it back, right? And I think maybe that's more thing. The forces of the pendulum, one side's going to push that back this way, and the other side's going to push it this way, and I think that's what's divided it so extreme, because the strongest forces are the ones pushing it, the loudest voices, and then with social media coming and it making waves of getting in front of people's faces, right, algorithmically, and then the company's trying to keep up with what is ethical and what is right, and it's.
I'll just say that we don't have a system that's like perfect governance and we go on and live our lives. We have a system that requires our involvement. And that involvement starts with what you're doing here in South San, but it starts with like schools opening up for parents, because teachers' lives are better when they have parental involvement. But they have to make schools inviting for parents, and especially first-gen parents that might not have had that experience or have that confidence. It means voting in your school board elections. It means voting in your city elections. It means keeping informed, and that's just one other responsibility that we have on top of our children, or on top of mortgages, or on top of car payments or whatever else, and leading the lives that we hope to live, not to live yet, to live. But I think we just always have to remind ourselves, we're blessed to live in a democracy, but it comes with a responsibility.
Right. Going back to your hope question. So, yeah, that's my hope. What's your hope?
I think the whole thing that it started in LA, as you said, is really neighbors looking after neighbors. I think it was a state rep that was, followed an ICE vehicle, that was stopped across from the Home Depot. Make sure that was on networks, that people were aware that, because it was really the building up, the masking that started to happen, that this wasn't, the ordinary procedures of ICE. This was, a massive buildup that was happening. And that was really just neighbors looking after neighbors. Eventually we have to watch out. What starts off as like respect for immigrants turns into a free speech argument, and then turns into something else.
Sure.
Recognize that we all have multiple values, and that hammer can hit any one of our knees, but we got to bring it still back to that dignity and respect for people. And that then goes beyond us. I think you asked values that were passed on, and I'll say another one that now comes back to me. But we are under the attack of, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm just going to focus on inclusion. And yeah, that was not maybe greatly marketed, but the inclusion part of it was always, drilled into us. For my dad, it started in Del Rio, maybe not that diverse, but you still had an Anglo and Hispanic part of it, but it was the world of books. World War II, it was service that introduced him to people from all walks of life. Then because of service, it was the GI Bill that allowed him to be the first in his generation to go to college, and again, meet a broader variety of folks and build his networks. And then it was the opportunities in politics that you get to build coalitions. It's not always a fight. It's building coalitions and seeing commonality and where we can work together. I was in 7th or 8th grade. I was a decent student. I tried, and we were given the assignment to invite our parents to come to class and speak for career day. And so I perfunctorily, passed on the invitation with the expectation he's busy. And then he said, "Oh, sure." And then I shrunk because I was so afraid of him coming to school and speaking to the class. And
were you nervous for him, or you were embarrassed?
No, nervous for myself. Very nervous for myself. But my dad was actually always the joke teller. He could always hold court. But his humor was a little bilingual. It was border. It was very regional in many respects. But he can make a friend out of anybody.
Yeah.
And in minutes, he had my whole class eating out of his hand. And the message he told then was what he still would drill into me and my siblings was, break out of your circles, expand your circles, meet people different than you, Don't be clannish. Don't be cliquish. These are your best friends. Great. They'll be friends for life. Reach out to other people. And as we're in this and we think about history, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. There was, Native Americans forced into boarding schools that try to, did forced assimilation. The lack of seeing humanity in others. We're not the first, won't be the last. Right. And at times, frankly, it's ourselves doing it too. And so that understanding of history, that understanding of there is more we have in commonality, and I think we can build that. So a lot of times people stay out of this argument because it feels like an argument or it feels like a fight. I would make the proposition that it's an opportunity to community build. It's an opportunity to share stories. It's an opportunity to tell people about what immigrants are contributing to our communities and strengthening them. It's a chance to tell history, and find the friendships that happen that aren't just because we're 100% alike, but we really share more values and we share life experiences.
Yeah, man, well said. Beautiful.
The other, we're looking for easy solutions when there's not always easy solutions.
Right.
I think I shared to you too, just if there is a quote that occasionally comes back at me, was just the Thomas Edison one that people miss opportunities because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Democracy is work.
Right.
Community building is work. You and your wife will walk down the street, introduce yourself to neighbors, making sure they know who their neighbors are, invite them to a parade. You build a community. You reach out. We don't need the master solution as much as we need people building community. And then the willingness and the courage to speak up for their neighbors. And a reminder that, frankly, the majority of us are the least vulnerable. And so whatever consequences we pay, a neighbor looks at us with the side eye or whatever for speaking out on something or having a vocal opinion is nothing compared to families being broke apart.
Right. Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's jump into this timeline segment. Unless you have more to add to it.
No.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. This timeline segment is, as I mentioned to you, it's an exercise and a workshop we do with our students to help level the fields and connect. And it's an exercise where you share an impactful event that happened each year in your life, a positive impactful event or a negative impactful event.
I'll say this, and I think it is reflective, maybe not at the granular level that you're asking, but I'm a pretty privileged kid, my parents did the hard work, both one of 11, both out of Depression era families, but both, my dad got to go to college because of the GI Bill, my mom because she was the youngest, started off at junior college and then was able to go to Incarnate Word. And so, I'd go 0 through now first is just to say being blessed on a loving family, having two parents that worked hard but could make ends meet. Second, it still goes 0 through now, unfortunately. Siblings, I'm the youngest of 5.
So did you have it tough or did you have it easy?
Both.
Both.
Definitely had it easy. At some point they get tired of parenting, and so the rules are a little bit more lax than they were especially on the first 2 and maybe the first 3. But then you missed out on some of those early experiences that become kind of the family lore stories. They lost the video camera at some point or the film camera at some point. Like, we don't need to replace it. You're like, where are the photos of me? You don't really see that.
Oh, man, I got to keep that in mind. We're about to have 4 if we have another one.
But at the same time, just it's not an event. It's just simply saying, raised in a loving family and my siblings are still really tight, and reminded of that often, which is cool. Events, partly because of the sacrifice they did, but it was also, again, honoring service. We had the GI Bill, but I, grew up with the expectation of going to college. All my siblings did, and that door was open for us. Slightly more open if it was an in-state, school, and Dad kept his residency in Texas. And at the time I came, it was, I think, $5 an hour or something like that. My tuition bill was $300, and I was able to pay for the first year out of my own kind of job savings. But yeah, I think my son is now getting his first job, really, summer job. So he's working kayak rentals. But I remember my first job was at a Greek fast food restaurant. But that ability to have a little bit of money in savings for yourself, and then most of it for me went towards college expenses and living on my own. Those were formative periods. I'd say the professors I met at UT, in a massive school, the 50,000, the fact that I have two professors I kept up relationships as an adult with, and
Nice.
Remember their names and remember their influence. I consider myself fortunate. One of the professors was just, at the time, still is, just a leader in the field. I credit really for saving me from law school, but showing me that for my passions that there was a different routes and kind of opening those doors. Job wise, I had a chance. I'm sure there was a little bit of dad help, but it was really sending an application and got an internship with the state offices. Like state government in Texas has a office in DC to kind of have communication between Department of Agriculture there and our Texas Department of Agriculture and Health and health here and housing and that kind of stuff. So it was the state of Texas Office of State Federal Relations. They had a new ED who was only 27 years old and just looked at a resume and gave me a shot. But that gave me both that internship and that exposure. I got to, be a runner and take stuff and walk the halls of Congress was kind of cool. But really, you're around people that were just knew their area of policy, cared about it, showed the human impact of it, and having that exposure, I think was a big leg up. Keep going.
I'm all ears.
Let's see. No, I think I'm going to skip years. It was around 90-ish, I got a chance to kind of work on, Ann Richards' campaign, and then a little bit on the second one as well. Had mentors kind of to do the work that I wanted to do, and I got to live and stay in Austin. To really be exposed around people that were good at what they did, treated it like a craft, and showed you that aspect of it. I never really started my own business because I was entrepreneurial. So credit to you for encouraging that. I started my own business because at one point I was unemployable, and didn't want to leave Austin. And so that was the option. And
Sometimes that's the best fire, though.
yeah, it worked by trial and error, and the forgiveness and grace and goodwill of a lot of people that gave me those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say on that part of it, it doesn't sound like an event, but at some point I decided I'd rather be on my own than the company kind of took a turn into more like corporate work, which just wasn't calling me at the time. And then at the moment, the Democratic Party, the Democratic establishment was still kind of fighting to hold on to East Texas, and I went south. And so, there were friends, a bunch of Velasquez here in San Antonio, opened his door. His place on South Alamo, became like his upstairs conference room became a second office for me. Helped out on campaigns here, but then it also became a stopping ground as we did a lot of stuff in the Valley. And while we get to do now more professionalized campaigns out of state, where you're really working with large campaign teams, those experiences of traveling the Valley to San Antonio and to Laredo, Corpus, and doing hands-on people that are just running for office in their local communities was life-changing. You just, saw people who wanted to serve, but then you helped them, as we all have to do, is kind of let go what other people think of us and put the focus on other people and bring service kind of back into it, and then talking English or talking regular Spanish, and connect and build community. Again, it's not always a fight. I think it really is about a legacy, building something, service, making life better and looking out for your neighbors. And if we can communicate that more often, which we had a chance to do in a lot of local campaigns, if we can communicate that in the bigger campaigns and invite people back in, showing that we understand, what their aspirations are. Ruben Gallego is the new senator from Arizona, congressman before then. His big thing is to remind people that there's not an Hispanic male he meets in Arizona that doesn't want a troquita, doesn't want a Ford F-150 or something. It's an aspirational thing. And we get that from our parents. And that isn't greed. That is like, we know the sacrifices they made for us, and we have an obligation to kind of move that forward. So we may say the troquita, but all the other sacrifices are so our kids have something even better than us.
Right.
And that's the through line. I think it came from definitely from my dad's work. It came from my mom's sense of family, and it came through the grace and goodwill and mentorship and giving me an opportunity from a number of folks that's too long to list, but I don't forget.
Awesome. What's the next 5 years look like for you?
I think I mentioned we have an only kid. So married late. I'm the youngest of 5. My wife is the eldest of 6. We're one and done, so we're considered quitters on both sides. But I had the unrational fear, I've told you about my siblings meeting me, but I had the unrational fear of having an only child and what that would mean. All unrational. He's proved me wrong in every sense of the word. He connects with family no matter what the relation, even if he can't understand the relationships because of age levels and that I have 70 first cousins and he, it may be their grandkids or his age or something of that sort. But, I think the focus at the moment is helping and supporting him in his college exploration. He's communicated he wants to pursue a life in the arts and in music. And so I got to now wrap my head around that and what it means to support and educate myself on that part of it. So I think that's job 1. Job 2 is I'm very fortunate, while I might have been unemployable, I got a little team. We're able to do things in different areas, collaborate with different folks. And so I really feel like work is not just work. Work is a chance to kind of change the public conversation and how we can invite, especially Latino community Hispanics, into civic engagement and have their voice heard. And probably just as important, make sure that they feel heard. And I think there are still stereotypes on how that's done. There's silos between medians that how that's done. So we're having a chance to kind of break down some of those barriers, share some best practices, and then show authentic ways we think that can happen. But right now, as we talked about the times we live in, that's a steep hill, and if we can level out that hill a bit in the next 5 years, that goes hand in hand with family.
Yeah. So is that mostly in Austin, or is that with different clients you work with to help build up those teams, or? No, I think our work takes us where it does. We have a chance to do
there's a need. Support on the, Mayor Ron Nirenberg, who just gave up office yesterday, but we helped him on his last two campaigns, along with the bond campaign, along with the Ready to Work and a workforce development. We're doing a mayor's race in Edinburgh, a state rep race here in San Antonio. We're talking to other folks in Cameron County, but we do work in Nevada. We do work in Arizona. We do work in Florida. We do some work in California. everything right now is a bit nationalized, and if you can get success in one place, it can be a catalyst for others. The protests that started in LA then went across the country in solidarity and support. And Austin's, a bit of a progressive bubble. There's less things on changing, but there's still more need to still make it inclusive.
Yeah. What's your purpose in life?
I appreciate your focus on that. I appreciate, that you put that in there for your nonprofit. I don't know that there's one answer for everybody. And I'm not sure that I could say this is my purpose. I can say this is what drives me. Service, building community, making room for all voices to be there. I have strong opinions, as I think you're well aware, but then I have to remind myself I have to make room for other people's opinions. That can be within my family, or that can be within a larger political context. Even as we invite more Latinos into the conversation on many things, last cycle there was limited empathy for the plight of immigrants. I think that's dramatically changed, but they still have economic concerns and they still have their aspirations stuff. And so I want to make sure that conversation is vivid and strong. I want to make sure I don't want to talk about saving democracy. I want to put democracy in action and have people talk about the issues that matter to them. And I want to be a part of helping that endures for generations and generations and generations to come. But endures when you get people involved now.
Well said. Is what you're doing now what you wanted to do when you were growing up?
Oh, I probably, there's hopefully the arrogance and ego of me is tempered at some point, but I hope that the case. No, I'm sure I looked in the mirror and I saw myself as president. Or at the very least, I was a senator.
There's still a chance.
I was still very a senator, but so it was always in kind of a public realm. It was civil rights heroes, voting rights lawyers have always been my heroes. But then there's also broadening, that definition of public policy, and then broadening the definition of where I can contribute. I enjoy contributing on the communication, on the facilitation, on the education, and helping shape a narrative that allows people their dignity and invites people in. So it's not the same as it might have been. It's on the same trajectory, but with a whole different color and flavor, and I don't regret a bit of it.
Right. Is there something that you believed to be true as a kid, and as you've grown older, you realize it wasn't exactly what you thought it was?
I guess, and I've talked about this a number of times with my siblings, because we all have different perspectives on the same history, or what we think is the same history. I think there's something about being the youngest that allows you to observe the patterns. I wasn't the first to fight with my parents. I watched those fights happen. I knew how to ove those parts of it. But I guess I could then see the dynamics from both sides. On the life would be easier. They were up every day. They did their commute, by 6 a.m. They made sure that we were up for school. I mean, their life didn't look easy, even though it was middle class. Weekends were chores. It didn't really slow down. And then, eating out was seldom. It was still cooking, and it was a feast. My dad was a great cook. But that sense of like doing for others, down to cleaning the kitchen and making the house ready, was like constant. Definitely for younger generations, that friends would say their kids were, born after 9/11 and, go through a housing crash, go through, kind of college debt, and are now in this period. COVID to attack on the fundamental systems that we thought were permanent. That's a lot more rapid pace of change than I've had to deal with. But I guess I also see enough consistencies and resilience. Still worried, but enough faith in consistencies and resilience that there's a shared commitment that is ready to defend things we believe in.
So it seems being the youngest of 5, it allowed you to see the full picture of things and the pros of the arguments that your parents had and how they won and how they lost, and then for you to better tune yourself to be effective against your parents, and ultimately in everything you're doing to be able to see it from a big picture. That's how I'm interpreting it.
I think that's true. Even as the youngest, yes, things were a little bit easier on some aspects of it. You know, they were better off by the time I came in than when they started their family. But I was always prepared that life is a bit of work. But if you could do work and it's for your family, there's the bits of joy. Not everything that I wanted necessarily came my way. I don't get every client that that we pitch, don't win every campaign that matters to me. But the fact that there are sacrifices you make or you learn from a bump, or I don't mean to say wasn't intended to be, but you make best of what you have. You learn a lesson and regroup. Sometimes there are fortunate things that it didn't happen. Don't get me wrong. But I'd say the family unity and the sense of work and the why you work has led to a little disappointment.
Okay. What's the best advice you were ever given?
I created a cousin on one of them, and it was, I love the fact that his family kind of comes through town. There's always both a desire to and maybe combined with a little obligation that we have to connect. So a cousin was visiting through. This is probably in my mom's earlier years of Alzheimer's and dementia. And then I was the one, as far as siblings goes, kind of in primary care. But it was an older cousin, and his mom was repeating herself or not hearing the questions, and I was correcting her. And he was just like, be more patient. So I think you mentioned it either in this interview or over breakfast that, patience is something I gotta remember. And then I think patience also allows you to see the goodwill in others.
What's your greatest lesson learned?
One of the things that my mom would drill, and again, they were both Depression era kids, as you went to college, they're like, consider having business as a minor so you have something to fall back on. It was the something to fall back on and that sense of stability that they wanted. But that courage for failure, or that courage to step out further on a limb, which my father preached on a social basis of meeting other people. But what does it take to chase a dream, even if it falls short and you don't know if there is a safety net aspect of it? What does it mean to, like, when something is easy, do you stop, or do you treat it like a craft and like hone it further and make it harder? I think that sense of dedication, commitment, craftsmanship is something I have to remind myself on before we kind of, whatever the rule is, that we settle into the median. And there's, meditational stuff about like really getting good at what you do. There's, the difference it can make in how you shape it and push yourself. And I think the desire to push myself further may not be the greatest lesson, but it is the challenge I'm putting on myself more and more.
Yeah, that question I always think, and I learned the most from, that's how I connect with people. It's a lot of times it's when they present their humility that you're able to connect and see things through. And so that's one of my favorite questions to ask. So
I think we all grew up likely with a sense of humbleness and humility. And then, but making sure that it doesn't look non-humble or doesn't look egotistical to ask for what else is there. Is there another opportunity? If you're waiting for it to kind of fall in your lap versus, how do you get into that program? How do you see yourself into that? A lot of what you do with the mentoring program, in my understanding, or one of the benefit that I see in it, is you're helping people envision themselves in something that they might not have envisioned themselves in. We need a lot more humility, but as long as humility doesn't take away the envisioning aspect of stuff, doesn't take away the aspirational part of it, and seeing ourselves in what else can we do.
Right. That's right on. That's what these workshops are designed to do. That humility, but also show that this is the path for you to walk down.
So it's like, back at you, how do you balance in your own mentorship humility and confidence?
So I think through our experiences that we're sharing, so we have a framework.
Or is it confidence and service takes care of that? Go ahead. You have a framework.
We have a framework in how we connect and what we define as mentorship. So we define mentorship through 3 phases: choose, build, and be. An effective mentorship would happen under those 3 phases. You choose somebody who you'd like to model, right? We go to the website, we have an action component to that. We build them up through these workshops. This workshop is to help connect through humility, right? Through our impacts that have impactful events that have happened. A positive impactful event, which would probably yield confidence, right? And then a negative impact that would yield humility. And it's through that entrance, that invitation, that these great equalizers is what I'll call it. What are some of the things that we're able to connect with that we all go through? Death, right? We all lose parents and we all lose uncles. And if there happens to be that shared, we know that feeling. And that's the invitation in and upward to help grow that person into, oh, we felt the same and now me and him are the same. And so it's through an invitation of humility that we're able to lift up, and then through the emulation of somebody else's confidence that they're capable too. So I think our workshops and how we do it really help guide that. Now, I also believe that, and I've shared this on multiple platforms, that the type of attention we get and who we get it from determines where we end up in life. Now, what I mean by that is, it can go both ways. You get good attention, you get bad attention. You get attention from kids on the street. You want to model those, and you don't have an external force. I think we all lean on attention. Now, how do we ask for attention? As babies and kids, we'd cry for it. Fundamental, right? You don't speak, you cry. Yeah, I need food, and you literally cry. And as you grow older, you begin to, hey, mom, look at me, look, and you're doing the same thing your mom's doing. Look how high I can jump. And you're doing the same thing, and you emulate. And as you mature and get older, what do you do to get attention? You share experiences. We you don't necessarily have to be looking for it, but you share it, and the fact that I give you that attention. So we think a mentor is, and I say we, our board, me, Judith.
The philosophy of your nonprofit.
Philosophy of the nonprofit. We think that through mentorship, a friend is somebody who gives you attention. You can define a friend, right? I mean, certainly there's deeper bonds of best friends and all that. But a mentor is somebody who's wise or has experience and has a specific interest in something that you're trying to go through, who gives you attention. So through those models and emulating, crying, some adults we know still cry for attention. Some adults still emulate, right? I mean, I emulate all the time. I see a model that works, and I'm like, well, why not, right? And sharing experiences, and so it's those principles that those phases of mentorship and how we're able to use these social emotional tool set to be able to not only teach, but you do it through sharing, through your acts first, showing through these humility and things. I want to circle back. When you first started out in your topic, you were kind of alluding to how your parents had certain expectations for you to go through school. And you still ended up with your master's from UT, right? I mean,
I called it the gradual degree instead of the graduate degree because it took a little bit longer. But
gradual,
yes.
gradual. I hear ya. Oh yeah. Have you seen? How has that affected your approach and how you raise your kids?
And this would 100% be the influence of my dad. You know, small town but bookish. You know, he was doing ACLU protests. You know, in school. You know, whether it was the Mexicanos on the back or, you know, whether he was supposed to wear a black suit when his father passed or whatever, you know, he wore an armband or something different. But it was the books part of it, and then it was the service and war. Although he really talked about more service as part of, he became part of a movement, the American GI Forum, and you'd hear what they would do, you know, to ensure integrated schools and education for all, and push myths down. You know, for Carlitos, he's probably tired of hearing it. I'm like, I don't care about the grades. I want to see the effort, but more than anything, I want to see the intellectual curiosity. I want to, like, what does that make you think of when you're coming back down? You know, are you connecting dots? Are you understanding someone else's story that's new to you? That, if I get that at any point, it makes my day.
So that's what you look for in him.
Oh yeah,
it's those sparks that you see. That's what he was meant to do. That's what he was born for.
Well, not necessarily meant. You know, I probably approach that differently than you do on that part of it.
But there's something there.
Everything there's a story behind. Are you curious about it? You know, do you see the humanity in that person, or is it just like, you know, we move on and there's too many people to keep up with? Or, you know, did you listen to their story? Did you ask a question? Did it come back at, you know, in a way that it wants you to learn more? Yeah, I want a hunger for knowledge. I want a hunger for connection. I don't know that that's purpose in life. I think, but it's foundational to it.
Right. When people think of James Aldrete, what's one word that comes to mind?
Pain in the
one word. And that's your older brothers and sisters. People,
well, even clients and potentially wife at different times. It's a hyphenated word, so it's it's just like either down to earth, humanity, whatever you want to use for that we're taking complicated, you know, processes and systems and reminding ourselves it's about a human connection and it's about taking care of each other. If I can get that message out to more people, and that there's a down to earthness, or he breaks it down, brings in a laugh just to not make it too theoretical, reminds you that there's faces behind these policies, that's a win. Your other question, really back onto, you know, different than your 20s or different than you were raised, is really less concerned about what other people think. In a sense of like my reputation, or that it's about me. I hope they think I was respectful. I hope they think you know, the motives were good. But otherwise, reputational concern, less important than my name is out there etched in stone somewhere. You know, you just see other people asking questions, even if they disagree. We've sparked a conversation. You know, see people voting for the first time that, you know, that wasn't their interest in high school, but when they got the chance, at like a seed that might have been planted, that was there.
Right.
You know, if it was learning a language and travel to a different place and meeting something different, you know, that might have encouraged. If it's learning our own history, you know, all those things matter more than, you know. The most beautiful thing is when you can plant a seed and you don't get ownership in it, because so many other things watered it or nurtured it or cultivated it, and someone else took responsibility for it.
Yeah, well said. What's one word that comes to mind when they hear James Aldrete to your family? Specifically your core family, your wife and son.
You know, it may not be the most dramatic of word, but I'd just say present. and if not present, then it would be service. You know, for any school event that I missed, it was in service to community or you know, civic participation. But for the most part, you know, I think a large part of family is simply just being there for them. I mean, my Sunday mornings, frankly, through the Sonos system, I'll play Edie Gourmet, Trio Los Panchos, and the music of my parents. You know, it's people don't wake up early in my household.
Do you sing it?
On my own? Yes.
I was about to say we got a good setup for somebody to give us a couple lyrics.
We'll give you Piel Canela or Quizás.
If you need a Corona or a Dos Equis to get you going and warm up,
Maybe
those
the
pipes.
tequilita. But like, I mean, my memories. I mean, present service. I mean, it was just cleaning the kitchen. You know. Cooking breakfast, you know, that little stuff you can do for others, and the day starts because we support each other in that part of it. So hopefully the word would be just simply present.
I'll tell you that Judith and I, my wife, we struggle with being present, and I wonder if it's I've thought about this like a lot, and I've started to write some stuff down about it, but being first generation, right, coming from poverty, and it goes back to the metaphor I told you earlier, dribbling a basketball. I know you don't like this metaphor because it's two sports, but dribbling a basketball, you have to get good grades, AB honor roll, you got to join all the organizations, but you also got to be applying for like going to Harvard at the same time, right? You got to be throwing those long shots that, I mean, and if you're not throwing the long shot, I didn't apply for Harvard. I didn't apply at all. I applied to UT, but you know, it was a little baby Harvard in there. But you got to be doing those things, and when you're doing this and you're doing that, and you're never just here. And I think we both struggle with enjoying the now, like looking at. I know when certain accomplishments happen for the both of us, since we were dating and since we were kids, we'd always like downplay it, and it comes across as humble, and it is humble, but we often think, and I don't know if it's growing up Catholic, maybe it's as soon as something good happens, something bad's gonna happen, and I think that's a part of why maybe we don't enjoy or we're not present. And now that we're professionals, we've done the best in our families, right? And come together, and our kids will grow up privileged, right?
Yeah.
Being present is and enjoying the now has always been very challenging for us. And I wonder if for you, seeing your parents, because they were like the first, right? I mean, and the trailblazers, the accomplishments, and but being able to see, for you to see that being the youngest and understand the full picture, right? Because their focus might have probably been on their oldest going to college or going to this and going to that. And then, you know, it came down until it was your turn, but being able to see it all and seeing your parents struggle through that, you really focused on being present since or maybe that's what you wanted your parents to focus on. And I'm not pushing, my problems saying that that's similar to what your parents had, but I wonder if what the word that you think your kids will think of you now has been with you since before they were born.
Again, I'm in politics, and so it's obvious to most that I've, you know, modeled after dad, but in so many things it was really mom. But no, I mean,
was your mom always present?
I think they both were, really. And you know, I don't have to chase 5 or be outnumbered. We got 1, but you know, it's a teenage boy who may not, you know, they're not necessarily known for being communicative, and so it is those little moments where there's enough time span that thoughts come out and they share on their own pattern. As you were talking about voting, you share on your own time. You join us on your own timeline. We're going to keep this door open and tell you it's cool on this side. So giving it space to have those moments of those connection, you know, they're little things. if there was, a regret on my parents, they grew up in the era of being, castigated for speaking Spanish in school. And we were, as a kid, I was growing up in the East Coast, and they wanted to make sure none of their children spoke English with an accent or discriminated against because of our English. So I had to reclaim Spanish, and I was determined to do it. And I wanted it to be easier for Carlitos. So, I mean, he's just in a Spanish, immersion pre-K. It's 2 public school teachers that just started their own pre-K. But, fortunately, you don't find many males in kind of younger kid development stuff.
Yeah. I didn't have my first male teacher until 6th grade.
Yeah. But Osgod was one. And so, we're just like walking in late one time at the time of the year when it gets dark early to Toys R Us, probably to get a birthday gift for some party we're going to. And he just goes, "Mira, papá, la luna." It's like, boom, And then it's just a connection because despite parents not teaching us Spanish directly, it was their social language. And my dad could hold court, and he was a great joke teller. And so even as I learned Spanish, I had to keep up with the setups, and then I'd lose the punchline because it would be a pun or a play on words or something like that. And I'd
Sounds like me in English.
But yeah, do my best to like move us from being busy and eating dinner in front of the TV to having enough times where it's just around the table and leaving room for conversation. So it's not always like that there are these critical moments that you're there for, but it's just creating space for everyday moments.
Yes. Yeah, and maybe it's just being able to enjoy the now. I think that's probably more what I was leaning on. Is there whose death affected you greatly? The greatest?
Shared with you from a large family. Shared with you that my mom was the youngest of 11. And so dad was older than her. So as he was the 7th, there was always older relatives. I guess death became as common, frankly, as weddings, as births and other stuff. And so that sense of none of us are here permanently was there. Definitely a big part of my dad's speeches as he'd share another different lesson. But I was 25 when he passed. Still, a rock and kind of it was great to have that transition, however brief it was, from being kid to being friend. So when he went to UT post World War II, he could, at that point, you could get enough credits and then he could go to law school. And so he never got his undergraduate degree, but he got his JD and from the University from South Texas College of Law in Houston. When he semi-retired, moving back from DC, I was already, I think, a junior in college. And he decided that he wanted to, for his ego's sake, get his UT degree. And so we ended up, out of the weirdness, taking a class together.
Get out of here.
It was Charles Almeida's and Hispanic Stereotypes in Film and TV. And he was such the teacher's pet. And if for whatever reason I slept in one day,
you missed class.
I went back to the professor to pick up my paper. He goes, "Oh, I gave it to your dad." And I'm like, "Oh." So we had some cool opportunities. We had, he made his transition from DC level to kind of coming back to state level, and some challenges there. We had some long conversations. Losing, I was just starting to kind of make my way. So losing at 25 was both hard, but it was also a challenge. And I think those times of challenge is when you get a chance to step up.
Yeah. How old was he?
He was young, 67, young in my book.
Yeah, that was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least. Well, to your point, at least you were. I'd never understood my dad more until I became a man, and to be able to have those conversations, as you said, as a friend, right? I'm sure you wouldn't trade that for anything.
No, they're pretty special.
Yeah. If you were to die today, like, knock on wood, who's the one person you would call?
I don't know. I think, there was the COVID period that if we didn't already know it kind of as a lesson in life, not to let things go unsaid or not to let too much time pass and then check in on those you care about. But definitely increase the intentionality of touching base and keeping up with people that matter to you, or let them know that they're either loved or the difference that they made in your life. So I'd have to give some thought, because it would either be, the one person I'd call would either be number one, wife, Elma, number two, Carlitos, but maybe competing in that whole direction would be like, I see them a bunch. Who's the one person that it's been way too long? And so I have to give that some thought. So it would likely be family, but I think if depending on how much time I had to think about this and whether death was coming to me for the past 6 months till today, or I just get hit by a truck,
or you know the truck's coming. You can't. It's
if
following
I know
you.
the truck's coming,
the road's driving right here. This is the outside wall.
Then while names aren't coming to mind, let me just be honest. There's a bunch of people that have had a big impact in my life that I probably haven't checked in on it. So that list would be long.
What would you say to your wife?
Probably a joke, I think, and it'd probably be
don't mess up the punchline. You only got one shot.
I wouldn't mess up the punchline, but no, I think I'd probably lean into a corny one. One that's been told. Yeah, leave them with a groaner, and she'll ask like, "Really, you gonna leave with that?" And I'll say, "Watch out, there's more." But I go back to saying that I think if you live a good life, you've said what needs to be said. And then if you can leave them with something, it's just a reminder of how blessed we were.
And if you could tell your boy something, what would you tell him?
Oh, it'd be a bad joke, a really bad joke.
A bad joke.
Oh yeah, it'd be a really groaner. It'd be the corniest you can imagine.
And message wise after that?
No, I think he's a smart kid, and I think the message is already there. He's a loving, kind kid. There's nothing he needs to necessarily be reminded of, other than for us, with that family support, with the privileges that we have, as long as it's not necessarily material based, but you realize all the foundations you have in life, it's your job to pass the laugh on to the next person.
Passing him the baton.
Well, passing the baton, but it was passed to me, and unless I'm really dying tomorrow, it'll get passed back to me at some point.
Yeah,
probably before tomorrow. And we all have that responsibility. But I think there is a benefit to the joke. It is
it's you.
Well, it's life isn't heavy. Life is a blessing. Yeah, there's work, but there is joy in work. There's joy in the presence of others. And make sure, maybe it was profound when I said present. Make sure to be present.
Well said. Do you believe in God?
Yeah.
Why?
I guess it would be, my mom made me, number one. Two, like I said, we drive 5 kids in a car, occasionally pick up my grandmother in Del Rio and drive her down to Brownsville. So that was like 8 of us in a car. And we'd go to my grandmother's house, and she lived with, out of the 11, 4 sisters didn't get married because my grandfather passed very young. My mom was 7. My tias really kind of helped take care of the rest of the family along with my grandmother. And they'd go, all in one house, nothing fancy. They'd go in the backyard every afternoon at a certain hour, say the rosary. They'd cook an extra meal for the blind woman around the corner. Another tia would go back over to St. Thomas and go do, communion for seniors and for the homebound. And no matter, to me, in my privileged life in D.C. and looking at that, it's like whatever little they were given, faith just drove them. And when you see that constant part of it, you're going, there's some power to that. And so that's hard to witness and not respect. So that was driven into me.
Has your faith always been this strong?
Well, we didn't say how strong it was.
How strong? Do you have faith?
Yes, I do. I take faith probably differently. I take faith not as necessarily a foundation, but a challenge. It was we did go to church every Sunday, and every holy day of obligation, and do all the sacraments. But over, when you hear the same readings year over year, only a couple stick out. Ash Wednesday always sticks out to me. Pray in private. You're gonna fast. Don't make a big deal of it. Don't be the showboat of the hypocrites that they were brought up. And then the second one, would be all the challenges. The prodigal son is like, that's not fair. That's not fair at all.
Not fair, yeah.
But then, like, how do you do that part of love? The 2 commandments as opposed to the 10. That one was a tough one. It's like, what do you do for the least of my brothers? You do unto me. To love people that are hard to love. And that challenge is, anyway, is my faith foundation? Maybe. Is it a daily challenge? 100%.
Well, it's a practice. It's not a perfection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the Ash Wednesday one always, it takes me back to, as a child, I remember the priest always saying, you don't go walking around with your pockets tucked out. Look at all the money I gave. I don't have any. My pockets are out, right? That reading homily always stuck
but
with me.
But then we walk out with ashes on our heads.
I know, right?
That never made any sense to me.
Yeah. How do you know if something is divine?
I'll go back to the challenge of faith. I think you accept that everything is. How do you see the divine in everything? I struggle with seeing or falling into or letting my eyes deceive me of just seeing a hierarchy. I don't think you have to have this glowing bush of knowledge to, I think the challenge is saying, COVID again was a tough time. We live across the street from a park. The amount of homeless that kind of gathered there, the amount of drug trafficking that happens there, is disturbing. And then how do I see the divine in them? The humanity in them? I don't know. What's your answer?
It's deep.
Well, you started this.
Yeah, I know. I know. I go to parables, right? That and I pray a lot. And recently I asked this question a lot because I struggle with figuring it out. What's divine, right? Is this what God wants me to do, or is this what I want to do, or is this what somebody else is influencing me to do? And then maybe all three of those. I think there's oftentimes I look at it very much so as if I were born the 5th out of 5, the whole picture, right? And saying like, okay, if there's conflict here and there's an easy answer to there and they can't see it because they don't have enough vision, then am I looking at this as if Jesus would, right? So I always lean back to that. So do I have enough vision to understand something? Is it possible that there's another way to look at it, even if I'm absolutely certain, whatever that decision is? I'm going to go back to a homily one of the fathers told me when I was in Austin. He told this joke about a lighthouse. Have you ever heard the lighthouse joke?
Hit me.
So there's this big old U.S. Continental captain of a ship that's driving, and they see this light of another ship coming towards them. Familiar? So the captain tells the young first seaman, make an announcement, tell the other ship to steer left, we're coming in. This is the U.S. Continental, steer left, we're coming in 500 clicks. They call back, you steer left. So the captain starts getting, hey, he didn't know that was from me. It was from the seaman, right? Just tell him, okay. So he goes, tell him this is from the captain. We're 300 clicks coming in. Steer left or they will be destroyed. They tell him, from the captain, you need to steer left. We're 300 clicks in. The other person on the other line calls back and says, you steer left. So captain's mad, right? He starts telling, all right, load up all the warheads. Let's blow this guy out of here because as soon as we get up to 100 clicks, we need to be able to move out of the way. So he loads everything up and he tells them this is their last chance. So he calls over the radio. This is the U.S. Continental. By orders of our captain, steer left or we will blow you up. We are the U.S. Continental. On the other side, they come back and he says, we are a lighthouse. You steer left. And man, when he told me that, yeah, I was also going through a lot of challenges in college. It was tough. I needed that parable or joke, really. And what it goes to say is, no matter what you have going on in front of you, no matter what light or what you think you see or what you think you know, there's always a bigger picture to it, right? And the only one who really sees that picture is God. And you have to have complete faith and trust in him. And if you have that trust that he'll take care of you no matter what, you're pretty much invincible. Not invincible, but you got a level of confidence that and you know, living life with that divine purpose. So when I determine if something is divine, I often think, am I looking big enough? And because I have made more mistakes looking small than I have looking big. So that was a long-winded answer for yours. But
all right, I'll counter your divine purpose with divine process. I'm not always convinced that there's a divine purpose or that the way things happen is the way that God necessarily wanted it to happen. But if there is a process that he laid out, it does mean I have to remember to listen. I have to remember to see things from their perspective as well. You know, Jesus, you know, took time with the prostitutes, with the tax collectors, with the lepers, you know, with everyone. And the idea that it's my way or the highway kind of thing, or I understand this better. In politics, talking about process is always a losing argument. You know, you want to talk about end games, about where you'll be in your life will be better. But so much of the institutions that protect things is about process. And I think it goes beyond politics to simply saying, I'm not sure that I'm fully with you that there are divine solutions. But if we see humanity in others, if we have, you know, due process, if we show people that level of respect, the outcome may be different than we thought, but it could be close to divine too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is there a parable you live by?
Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for a while, even though it's been a while since we caught up. And you know, I am a kid of Vatican II, so it was like right after, you know, the changes that kind of democratized, you know, the faith and the way it was practiced. You know, if there were religious heroes, it would be a combination of Mother Teresa, but also the liberation theologists of South America and Central America, and those that use their faith really to challenge the system. So the parables that stick with me, or the biblical stories that stick with me, are always the rebellious ones. I definitely pick and choose the rebellious ones, no doubt. It is the reminder that to get off our hierarchy, you know, and my mom loved, you know, the dicho, dime con quien andas, and, you know, you want to be with that group. I'm like, they're humans too. Maybe we have something to share with them. Maybe we have something to learn from them. So how we reach out to others beyond kind of a hierarchy is one that's in my head. And again, the New Testament commandments on do we see Jesus in everyone, and are we reaching out to the least among us, are the things that challenge me. There's a couple parables that will kind of come back up. The ones that stick in my head are the ones I have the most trouble swallowing, which is like the prodigal son. I get the story. I get the message. It's still sometimes hard.
It's not fair.
Yeah, but I get it.
Yeah.
So accepting it, getting over my initial objections to it, understanding, that what really unconditional love is.
Unconditional love.
Those the things that remind me that you can always reach a little bit higher.
Right. Yeah, unconditional love. Oof. Something you need to understand before you get married.
Well, I grew up with conditions and conditions and conditions.
Yeah, I know.
That was that dribbling you were talking about. You have to do this right and do this right.
Yeah, I know conditional love real good. No, my parents they love me unconditionally. No, but yeah, I've got plenty of questions for parables and I've been very blessed that the priests that I've talked with and especially our pastor here at St. Joseph South San, he's a Capuchin Franciscan, and for the first time Franciscans is there's a big Franciscan presence from the missions to the formation of San Antonio back in the day and the Canary Islands, but it's been many years since the Franciscans moved back into our church, and man, he's been so insightful and just educational, and I think it's important to be able to ask hard questions, especially parables that are the hardest to swallow, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And then understanding and doing your best to understand and accept and but what I will say about our priest here, more than anything, his energy and his power that has been shed amongst all of us has been the focus on unity. And I think I'm not gonna say never has there been a time we're so divided. Civil War. There's a lot to compare to before my time, but it sure feels like it's pretty bad in how divided we are. And it's important to. I'm gonna have him on the podcast too some point, but I want to talk about the power in unity and the thing that, this is my own ad, these aren't his words. When most parents or most people die, the one thing that they'll tell their kids before they die is to take care of your brother, take care of your sister, and get along. And that's what most parents' last kind of wishing things is those who they leave behind, their generations, to get along and work together. And you're stronger when you're united. And especially, and I wonder why they say that. And it's because they're the patriarch that holds the family together. Mm-hmm. They're the reason everybody gets together. It's to go see grandpa. It's to go see dad. And say, oh, it's his birthday. We all got to go drop everything. These aren't very, very many left. And, maybe this better because, your father has passed. And it's like, how rare is it for everybody to be able to get together, And it's no fault to anybody. You grow your family, your tree splans, but there's something special about that. And how easy is it to be divided and be mad because somebody said something that didn't rub you the right way, or they think this and you don't think that. And it all comes back to coming across the lines, right? We're all, if we can see the face in each other, and if we have this division in our own nuclear family, it's only magnified across the world. And I think that's what we're facing today.
Unity.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you're promoting? Voting, yes, sir.
I know San Antonio just finished an election, but no, it's just civic participation.
Get involved.
For those that are interested in Latino politics, we're starting to share some thoughts on Substack. So it's just at James Aldrete.
have it linked down below. Get all that in there. Yeah, I was going to ask, where can people follow up with you?
James@mapwins.com.
Okay. And yeah, I'd love the conversations. It's always picking up right where we left off since I was living in Austin. Now moving back here. We got 3 kids.
We switched out enchiladas y más for Mendez Cafe. So
Mendez, yeah, that's right. Best place in town right here, Mendez Cafe. Ms. Mendez, 70 something. Mr. Mendez, I think he's 87 years old, and they're still cooking in the kitchen, getting us the best food in town. I don't know how many more years we'll be doing that, but we're lucky. I'm glad you got to experience
Thanks
it.
for sharing that.
But no, it's always a pleasure talking with you. You give good fruit for good thought. I'm at a loss for words where we're at right now, and it's hard to think past what's going on right now. But I think the solution does lie at putting a face on those people who are the most vulnerable, to be able to have humanity for it. It's also I'm going to throw the Hail Mary again. We got to focus on those big problems that are systematic, and fundamentally we got to reach across the lines and be united. We can't be divided in these hard times, especially with the crazy things going along across the world.
Well, first, last rather. Thanks for the invitation, brother. And I'm here for one reason, just out of total respect for everything you guys are doing, you and your wife are doing with the Build a Purpose, with, supporting your local school district, inviting your other neighbors in new neighbors into a sense of community. You may call that a Hail Mary, or you call that dribbling. It's work and it's love, and it's really sweet to watch. And I'm here to just simply cheer you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.